of. It's the evil and the ugliness of people's hearts these days is everywhere.
This is Franky Rose's Think Tank. Here's your host, Franky Rose.
Well, good morning, tankers. I hope you're all doing wonderful. So we have day 24, week 8 of the Karen Reed Shite Show. So we're going to start off with the defense questioning this witness, I do believe. Let's see if we can get through without too many sidebars, too many breaks. I don't know, guys. Oh, let's see here. And they're on. So let's see if they're going to be on time. Good morning, Carrie. Good to see you, girlfriend. Do you think they're going to be on time today? That's my number one question right now. They have, 3 minutes? But if she goes by her typical schedule, it's about 10 past the hour, so they still have almost 15 minutes. But I enjoy being able to get together a couple minutes before this all starts so we can settle, get our coffees, get our smokes of whatever, get settled in our comfy chair. And the girls are already asking for cookies. So what do you think? Are we going to have another explosive day? Yesterday was amazing. I totally enjoyed that, Yanetti. Shame on you. Mr. Proctologist, shame on you. He was, I don't know, he pretty much, as of yesterday, had me just sitting here mind numbed, like, so where are they going to take this now? How can they take this anywhere? I don't know. The guy that's on the stand right now, he seems a little bit more together, but we'll see once the defense really gets in there as to, I don't know how solid is this guy, because so far nothing has been on the up and up, at least not looking like that anyways. So subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget that thumb, guys. Bump me up into that algorithm. The channel would really appreciate it. What are you ladies doing? Girls are ready to go. Let's see if we can keep them quiet. I don't think they like the sound of Lally's voice. Go figure. Go figure. Let me see here what we got going. Give me 2 seconds. Did you get your coffee into you there, Keza? I just realized I'm out of sugar. You. Okay. 2 seconds here. Let's get settled in. Nice. I'm just going to get a couple things ready here. Give me a second. I know, Jazzy. More Bev and Lolly. Can you handle it? Can you handle it? What's that saying? You want more? We'll give you more. It's coming. Do a little bit of tweaking here. My computer was making horrible noises again this morning. So is she going to start on time? It is now top of the hour. So if she's on time, we'd be starting now. We've talked about this, Jasmine. We've talked about this a few times about how much time the jurors would actually have if she was on time. That's enough out of you guys. That's enough out of you guys. They would be gaining a lot of extra time if we didn't, as we've talked about, if she didn't take so much time off and if she could have her courtroom on time. But she doesn't seem to be able to do this. Jasmine, that is enough out of you. No, ladies. It looks like I was watching Vinny last night on the Stephen Stern case, and I will be doing more digging for those files because I have not found them yet. They're out there, and I'm going to continue to look. But I think right now, a lot of the ones that are out there, they've paid all that money to get the files. And sadly, I don't make enough money to be able to bring those in. So I have to wait and hope that somebody puts out something. I have been looking, but I'm not finding a damn thing. It's 800 pages. So as soon as I can, I'm going to search today all day, and I'm also going to be searching until I find them. But I'm even looking now, I'm still not finding a darn thing. I was hoping I'd have it here for you. Now, I think these documents, I think they had to pay something like $300. Okay, what have I got here? Have I got a document? No. Oh, I'm going to pin this. Medium. Have you ever heard of that? Medium. And that's something. I've never heard of that platform. Have you? Medium. Oh, I know, Harley. I know. Yeah, exactly. Awaiting another episode of Facts and Unbelievable Conduct, brought to you by the Massachusetts finest. I love it. I'm hiding from the sun right now. It's blinding me. It's blinding me. So yeah, as usual, Bev has started another day late. Do you think that these jurors are getting as frustrated as we are, or more so, maybe? Oh. Yeah. Do, 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 do. That's exactly what it does. Bibble. The circus continues. Looking, looking, looking. What is going on with this damn trial? Oh my God. Unreal. Do 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 do. Good God. Well, I'll continue to look for this paperwork, like I said, because it's got to be out there, right? Got some interesting comments. Well, good morning, Maxie. Good morning, good morning. Did you hear from our friend this morning? For some reason, my Discord tab isn't showing up. I didn't know what's going on with that. Good Lord.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. All parties having anything to do before the Honorable First Justice Beverly Cannoni, now sitting in the Norfolk Superior Court within and for the County of Norfolk, draw near and give your attention. Shall be heard. Say the Commonwealth in this good court. Thank you. May be seated. Court is now in session.
22-117, the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed.
All right, good morning, counsel. Good morning, Ms. Reed. Good morning, jurors. I have to ask you those same three questions. Were you all able to follow the instructions and refrain from discussing this case with anyone since we left yesterday?
Yes.
Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Were you also able to follow the instructions and refrain from doing any independent research or investigation into this case? Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Did anyone happen to see, hear, read anything about this case since we left yesterday? Everyone said no or shook their heads. Thank you very much. May we have Detective Lieutenant Tully, please?
Just watch your step on me. May stand and face the clerk.
You solemnly swear the evidence you report and jury in the case now hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Again, if you could just please state your name and spell your last name for the jury.
Brian Tully, Tully.
Now, Lieutenant Tully, you were testifying yesterday. You were testifying in some part about a search that you did in conjunction with the CERT team at 34 Fairview on January 29, 2022, correct?
Yes.
And at any point in time, did you or any other member of your unit conduct any search of the residence at 34 Fairview Road?
No.
And why not?
We had no reason to believe there'd be evidence found within the home of 34 Fairview Road.
Now, Lieutenant, if you could you inform the jury a little bit about sort of search warrants as far as residences go and what is required in Massachusetts for you to conduct a search warrant?
Objection.
So we haven't heard the question. Let's hear the question.
That was the question, I'm sorry.
I thought it was you informed the jury about search warrants and then what?
If I interrupted
Did you
you,
complete your question?
I did, Your Honor, yes.
Okay. So it's sustained then.
thank you.
As far as, Lieutenant, over the course of your career, you've conducted search warrants of people's residences, correct?
Yes.
And what do you need to do?
A search warrant, consent, or exigent circumstance.
And as far as a search warrant is concerned, what is needed or what is necessary in order for you to get a search warrant?
Objection.
Jody, tell Timmy to be quiet. So I'm going to allow him to build a foundation here. So the objections are.
As governed by the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and Article 14 of the Massachusetts Constitution, law enforcement is required to get a search warrant if we're going to invade someone's privacy. In order to obtain a search warrant, I need to gather facts that I swear an oath and affirm that are true and accurate, that there is probable cause, which means more likely than not that a specific piece of evidence will be found in a specific location and it's related to a crime. So I need to check those boxes in order to obtain a search warrant through the trial court.
And what, if any, information did you have related to specific evidence of a crime in relation to the interior of the residence at 34 Fairview Road?
I didn't have any. When thinking about residence and search warrants and evidence, I need to put the evidence inside the house. And so I don't believe that Mr. O'Keefe entered the home. So I had no nexus to the house.
And what, if any, evidence did you have that Mr. O'Keefe had ever entered the home at 34 Fairview Road on January 29th or on any other day?
I don't. On the contrary, I have evidence that he was outside, but I don't have anything putting him inside the residence.
Now, you're aware that, or you testified yesterday that at some point while you and the search team were conducting the search at 34 Fairview, the Sergeant Mechanic and Trooper Proctor were following a tow truck with the defendant's vehicle from Dighton to the Canton Police Department, correct?
Yes.
And in reference to taking the vehicle to the Canton Police Department, how was that decision arrived at? What, if any, discussion or what, if any, other options did you have?
So Sergeant Mechanic and I had conversations. It was ultimately my decision of where the vehicle was going to go. And so we need to find a location that was secure, indoors, and preferably heated. And so we start going through checklists of what's available. So you start thinking, obviously, of state police facilities. So between Dighton and Canton, where our office is as well, you have the Foxborough Barracks, which was, I worked out of the Foxborough Barracks. The garage was probably not appropriate for that large vehicle to get in there. It's an old building. I worked at the State Police Barracks in Milton. That's even worse, with a smaller garage that's attached inside of an older building. So the Canton Police Department was the next step. It was kind of checked all those boxes. It was inside, it was secure, and it was heated.
Now, over the course of your career, specifically within the homicide units of the detective unit of the district attorney's office, approximately how many investigations have you led or been a part of in relation to? Let me first ask you this: as far as your unit is concerned, how is it that, from a staffing perspective, how is it that an investigation is conducted as far as certain roles, or can you speak a little bit about sort of the roles that different people within your unit play with reference to an investigation, just in the general sense?
Within the unit, we have different sections. We have the homicide section, narcotics section, and special investigations. So each is kind of broken up into that. Obviously, the homicide section will undertake homicide investigations, but we work as a team. So there'll be situations where you may need an all hands on deck just to get some people out there. So the narcotics folks will help with homicide investigations and vice versa. The homicide people will help with narcotics investigations when needed.
Your Honor, may I just have a moment?
Yes.
Now, specifically when it comes to a death investigation, there's someone who's assigned as what you call a case officer, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what the role of the case officer is, and what, if any, other sort of supervision there is with reference to that case officer?
The case officer is essentially the central collection point for the investigation. So they are the person that would gather the evidence, the records, hold those records, and then somebody needs to be held accountable for a to-do list or something to do. Supervisor would go to that one person, as well as the district attorney's office would know who to contact about a certain case, and then we'll go from there. Obviously, that case officer usually is a rank of trooper, especially when talking about unattended deaths. They have a sergeant and 2 lieutenants that are supervising them in that realm.
And as far as interviews are concerned, what, if any, sort of policy is there with regard to troopers, and how many would be involved in the interview of any witness?
We would always have 2 people present, either a trooper and a local detective, or 2 troopers. Just one ask questions, one take note taking. It's just good practice.
And with respect to this investigation, the locals, as far as Canton Police Department, was not something that you utilized, correct?
Correct.
And again, I know you testified a little bit about it yesterday, but if you could just reiterate or expound upon sort of what your discussions were with the chief as far as Canton Police Department's involvement in this investigation going forward, following the early morning hours of January 29th.
Our conversation circled around in the early hours about the homeowner of 34 Fairview, which was Brian Albert, has a brother, Kevin Albert, who was a detective with the Canton Police Department. And so where we were, we had essentially zero information about the investigation. We wanted to remove any appearance of conflict by not having Kevin Albert or any of his coworkers involved in the investigation.
Was that in the investigation in its entirety, or the interviewing process, or how was that sort of delineated, if at all?
Definitely no interviews. They were not involved in any discussion. Essentially the entire investigation.
And as far as the case officer is concerned, is the case officer someone who, particularly in a homicide investigation, is as far as a decision regarding charging, is that something that the case officer would be tasked with?
No.
Now, Turning your attention back to your testimony yesterday, there were items that you had retrieved from search on January 29th, correct?
Yes.
And as a precursor, if I could ask you sort of, over the course of your career, specifically within the homicide unit with the district attorney's office, about how many death investigations, homicide investigations have you been involved in?
I would say in excess of 600 unattended death investigations that I personally investigated. That's not counting those phone calls the calls I end up declining that I'd mentioned yesterday. In addition to that, I probably have either worked or supervised 75 homicides. And then getting back to the unattended deaths, I've supervised countless since I've attained the rank of trooper and lieutenant. Sergeant and lieutenant.
And with respect to your training and with respect to your experience, how many of those investigations have involved injuries which included abrasion?
Probably 10 to 20% of them.
And if you could, at least from your understanding, if you could explain to the jury what your understanding of what is an abrasion.
Objection. Sustained.
With regard to the items that you recovered on January 29th, there was one piece of...
Speak up, Lolly, speak up.
That you termed as stippling on the outside, correct?
Yeah, I may have used the word dimples, but yeah.
Now, with respect to Mr. O'Keefe, at some point, did you have occasion to view photos of Mr. O'Keefe from the Good Samaritan Hospital?
Yes.
And with regard to the items that you recovered, what, if any, significance did you observe between those items and the injuries that you observed to Mr. O'Keefe?
The injuries to Mr. O'Keefe, I noticed the abrasions had a certain pattern on them. And I know that when a blunt force object is involved in causing an abrasion, the characteristics of the object that comes in contact with a person will often leave the characteristics on that person in the form of an abrasion.
And with respect to this specific case, as far as any items recovered on January 29th and your observations of Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything, did you observe of any significance in relation to that?
I'd be comfortable in saying that the marks on Mr. O'Keefe are consistent with...
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention two other members of your units are troopers by the name of Trooper Dunn and Trooper Moore, is that correct?
Yes.
And on February 2nd, 2022, are you familiar with them retrieving some video in relation to this investigation?
Yes.
And specifically from the town of Canton, did they retrieve video from there?
Yes.
And specifically, what location did they retrieve video from?
From the Canton Public Library at 786 Washington Street.
And are you familiar with them speaking with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Jutras?
Yes.
And he's an IT person with the town of Canton.
He is.
And as far as the timestamp with regard to the video that was retrieved from the Canton Public Library, what, if any, information do you have in reference to that?
Whenever we retrieve video, we want to ensure the timestamp is accurate, because as we've learned, businesses are not always great about updating the timestamp. So that's always top of mind when we collect video. Mr. Jutras assured us that the timestamp on the video was consistent and in real time.
Now, the following day of February 3rd, you familiar with Trooper Moore retrieving some additional surveillance video?
Yes.
And where did he retrieve that video?
From Temple Beth Abraham in Canton at 1301 Washington Street.
Now, as far as those two locations, as far as the Canton Public Library and the Temple Beth Abraham, are you familiar with where they are in relation to each other?
Yes.
Both located on Washington Street, is that correct?
Yes.
And about how far away from each other are they?
About a mile and a half.
Now, with reference to the Temple video, what, if any, information did you receive in regard to the timestamp on that video?
That was also accurate.
Now, from each of these respective locations, what time frames was Trooper Moore in one instance and Trooper Moore and Trooper Dunn in the other instance? What timeframes of video did they retrieve from each of those respective locations?
From 12 a.m. midnight to 1 a.m. and from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m.
And why was it that those were the timeframes, based on what you learned to that point in the investigation? Why were those the timeframes that the troopers were looking for?
We had reason to believe that those were the times that Miss Reed's vehicle was traveling in and around that area.
And get to that a little bit more in a moment, but as far as reason to believe that that Ms. Reed's vehicle was traveling in the area around those times, what, if any, information did you have to base that on?
We had statements and video from the Waterfall Bar and Grill, also on Washington Street, a little bit further down, and the car departing in that direction. We had information about a car that matched her description arriving at 34 Fairview at a certain time shortly before 12:30 a.m. And so, like we always do, we do out a video canvas and look for video cameras from that first known point, which would be the Waterfall Bar and Grill, to the residence of 34 Fairview. And then from there, from 34 Fairview to 1 Meadows Ave, which was the home of John O'Keefe.
In reference to the morning hours between 5 and 6 a.m., the later morning hours between 5 and 6 a.m., what, if any, information did you have in relation to Ms. Reed's travel at that time?
So we had learned through interviews that she was calling people as early as 4:45 in an effort to locate Mr. O'Keefe, and a statement that she had left the house shortly after 5 a.m. We then know that she arrived at the McCabe residence on Country Lane after 5:30. So we're trying to account for the movements of the vehicle for that 30-minute block.
Now, in reference to phone calls, you've had occasion to review information related to the defendant's phone.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that about 4:45 in the morning, she made phone calls trying to ascertain, or allegedly trying to ascertain the whereabouts of Mr. O'Keefe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Prior to those 4:45 a.m. phone calls, were there other phone calls that the defendant placed?
Yes.
And to whom did she place those calls, and about what time?
Starting at 12:33 a.m. to 6:03 a.m., there were 53 phone calls from Ms. Reed to a phone number associated with John O'Keefe.
And in addition to those phone calls to Mr. O'Keefe's phone, what, if any, other calls did the defendant make prior to those 4:45 a.m.?
There were phone calls to her family members, to Jennifer McCabe, Kerry Roberts, Camaranos. Those are the ones that are off the top of my head. I have the notes in front of me if I want me to refer to them.
You all right, if the witness may?
Yes.
Take your time, Mr. Lawley. It's okay. We'll just rush Jackson and that team to make up for this. It's okay. Good God.
Would you like me to continue, ADA Lally?
Yes, please.
After 6:03, when Mr. O'Keefe was found, there are a number of calls to members of John O'Keefe's family.
No, the phone calls to family members of her own, that the defendant's family members, those were specifically to her mother and her father, is that correct?
Yes.
And did those phone calls precede the phone calls to either Ms. McCabe or Ms. Roberts or anybody else earlier that morning?
On the call detail records, they don't appear, but I know the phone dump has other information.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Yes.
Turning your attention back to the videos we were speaking about, showing you a disc, just ask you if you recognize that.
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
It is surveillance video from Temple Beth Abraham.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I want to seek to introduce you as the next exhibit.
Take your time, Mr. Lawley. It's okay. We have lots of time for you.
572.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good God.
Show you another document. Do you recognize that, sir?
I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
It is a map I created with icons of the town of Canton.
And how did you create that map, sir?
Using Google Earth as the mapping software, I placed icons on locations within the town of Canton that are relative to this investigation to provide better context and illustrate the area that we're going to be discussing.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Almost seek to introduce.
Jesus. Oh, just the way she says it, Harley.
Exhibit 570.
Oh, just it's the tone. It's like, oh, woman.
And Your Honor, may I return Exhibit 570 to the witness?
Yes.
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish that to the jury at this time.
Yes.
Good morning, Dandy.
Lieutenant, do you have the laser pointer there before you? Okay.
I do.
So using that laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to the icons that you inserted in reference to various points of relevant locations, as well as any sort of routes of travel or roadways depicted in this particular.
So each icon is a house-shaped icon that I had placed at different locations. The first one is red in color. It denotes where 34 Fairview Road is. Starting at the bottom, there is a pinkish color one that is the location of the Waterfall Bar and Grill. Just north of that, you'll see a brown one, which denotes the Canton Public Library. Following up this street here, which is Washington Street, you'll come to Temple Beth Abraham, which is denoted by the blue icon there. And then off to the right is One Meadows Lane with the green icon.
Now, as far as, and if you could just use that laser.
You think this guy's going to make any points for Lolly?
It is the blue icon in the center of the map.
Now, as far as where the temple is located in reference to specific roadways, it's, you mentioned located on Washington Street, correct?
Yes.
And so what, if any, roads intersect with Washington Street around the location of the temple?
Chapman Street is the street that runs in this direction towards Washington Street. So again, the Washington Street is this street here. It continues and stays Washington Street as it turns slightly east in that direction.
And as far as available points of directionality or ways to travel roadways from the area of the temple, it intersects in the area of Dedham Street, is that correct?
Yes.
And so as far as available routes of travel from Temple to 34 Fairview, if you could note those on the map.
If one was at the temple and were to travel to 34 Fairview, you could continue up Washington Street, take the left onto Dedham Street, which is that street you just mentioned, a left onto Cedar Crest, and to enter that neighborhood down here. One could take a left and come down Chapman Street and take the right to enter the neighborhood in that direction, straight onto Fairview Road.
And if you're approaching sort of from the Chapman Street side of Fairview Road, as you come down Fairview Road, which side of the road would 34 Fairview go?
Left.
And similarly, if you're approaching from the Cedar Crest side of Fairview Road and turn on Fairview Road, which side of the street would 34 Fairview Road go?
Right.
Thanks. Now, with respect to each of these videos, as far as the Canton Public Library video and the Temple video, these are exterior cameras, is that correct?
Yes.
And sort of orientation-wise, where do they focus on or where are they pointing?
The ones that we focused on were the ones that captured Washington Street.
Now, are you aware of another location right around the area of Temple Beth Abraham called Cassie's?
Yes.
And that's essentially like a convenience store, is that right?
Yes.
And were you able to, you or other troopers able to retrieve video from that location as well?
I don't believe so.
Now, Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish a portion of the video from the Canton Public Library, which is marked as Exhibit 110.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, from the first video, and from the time on the video, I'd ask you to go to about 12:15.
I'm sorry, 15 or 50?
15, 1 5. pause. Now, again, for orientation purposes, Lieutenant, if you could, using the laser pointer, just describe to the jury sort of what we're looking at here directionality-wise and what you observe in this video.
The main street in the video is Washington Street. The Waterfall Bar and Grill would be off to the right-hand side, and Temple Beth Abraham would be off to the left. The intersecting road we're looking at here is Sherman Ave, I believe.
And if one were to take that right, if you're coming from the right of the screen to the left of the screen on Washington Street heading towards Sherman, and you were to take that right on Sherman, where does that take you?
You would head towards the neighborhood that 1 Meadows Ave resides.
Now, were you also able, over the course of the investigation, did you have occasion to look at surveillance video from the Waterfall Bar and Grill itself?
Yes.
And from that video, were you able to determine a time at which Mr. O'Keefe was leaving from that establishment?
Yes.
And what, if any, observations as far as time, or what, if any, observations did you make as far as what Mr. O'Keefe was doing or had with him when he left the bar?
When he left shortly after midnight, he was holding what appears to be a clear glass container.
And do you recall which hand he was holding?
His right.
And
How odd, he
specifically, that
drinks
was about
beer.
11 a.m., is that correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, I'm going to ask you to press play here and then pause again at 12:15:58.
Oh, my coffee's so gross.
Now, looking up at the screen now where it's paused at 12:15:58, what, if anything, do you observe there?
I observe a large black SUV here on Washington Street.
And the large black SUV that you observed, is that consistent with what you've observed at the defendant's vehicle?
Yes.
And if you could describe to the jury as far as when I asked Ms. Gilman to press play, what is that vehicle going to?
It's going to continue north on Washington Street through the intersection on Sherman and continue north on Washington Street.
And what, if anything, is sort of in that directionality as it continues off of the screen to the left?
Be heading towards Temple Beth Abraham.
Gentlemen, if you could. Gentlemen, you can pause it there. Now, with respect, Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish portions of the Temple video.
Yes.
And just as a continuing, my intention would be to sort of go back and forth if that's all right with the court.
Okay. Yes.
Back and forth. Here we go.
I have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Oh, lolly. Oh, he's not as beet red as he was yesterday. I think Lolly might make a point or two. Because I'm curious. Jesus, Lolly.
And if you could pause there, thank you. Again, for orientation purposes, Lieutenant, if you could describe using the laser pointer there as far as what we're looking at in this particular camera angle and shot, and as far as the roadways that you use.
This is an exterior camera from Temple Beth Abraham at 1301 Washington Street. Where it's paused now at 1201, I believe is the timestamp, you see a vehicle here. That vehicle's traveling on Washington Street. We are now on the other side of Washington Street looking at it than we were from the library. So the south and towards the waterfall and the library would be off to the left. North would be off to the right.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could fast forward to 12:17. Now, as far as the time concerns, the video from the prior video from the library was about 12:15 a.m. when you saw the vehicle consistent with the defendants pass by that location.
Yes.
And so as far as this time that's up here now, approximately 12:17 or so, or somewhere within that minute between 12:17 and 12:18, is that consistent with the time it would take to travel from where the library is on Washington Street to where the temple is on Washington Street?
Yes.
And from this particular time period around 12:17, between the minutes of 12:17 and 12:18, what, if anything, did you observe with reference to, of significance with reference to this investigation on this portion of this video?
At approximately 12:17 and 56 seconds, you'll see a large black SUV travel from left to right on the screen, which would, again would be northbound.
And again, left to right on the screen, just for orientation purposes, what is in the direction from left to right on the screen as far as against this?
As you continue north on Washington Street, you would, I believe the next intersection on the left is Dedham Street, which one could take to get to 34 Fairview Road.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, and I would ask you again to follow the full set.
Lordy, lordy, I'm doing a few different searches in the background here. Yep, me too. Me too, Jingo. That's what I think, Keza. I do believe that all of this should be on that little black box.
And again, Lieutenant, directing your attention to the screen, and if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance you observe in this portion of the video at 12:17:56 from the temple.
A large black SUV traveling northbound on Washington Street.
And the large black SUV, is that consistent with the large black SUV that you observed in the prior video, Exhibit 110 from the Canton Public Library?
Yes.
Is that also consistent with what you observed as far as your personal observations of the defendant's vehicle?
Yes.
Sure looks like she's got a light there.
So when you can pause that, take that.
Looks
down.
like she's got it, everything
If I could
intact.
ask you for the Canton Public Library video again.
I don't know.
And from this, I'm going to ask for from the second video.
Golly, for frick's
Now,
sakes.
Lieutenant, direct your attention to up on the screen. This is the Canton Public Library video again, Exhibit 110.
Yes.
And as far as this is the time frame that you were talking about before, between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. that Troopers Dunn and Moore retrieved from Mr. Jutras, correct?
Yes.
And with reference to as far as the conditions outside at this particular time between 5 and 6 a.m., what, if anything, do you observe in this video?
The ground is now covered in snow.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to fast forward to about 5:11 a.m. and pause it there.
Look at that blizzard there. Oh my God. How can they see? That's one hell of a blizzard.
Now, Lieutenant, from this portion of this video from the Canton Public Library, what, if anything, of significance did you observe in this portion of the video relevant to this investigation?
You observe a large black SUV take a left from Sherman Street onto Washington Street, heading south.
And as far as the directionality from where that vehicle came from and the directionality where that vehicle is headed toward, what, if any, of the locations of significance are located in those areas?
So again, Sherman Street or Ave goes straight to 1 Meadows. So if one were to travel from Meadows Ave, the residence of John O'Keefe, to this location here, you would come down Sherman and you could take a left onto Washington Street to head south.
And as far as south on Washington Street, again, off to the right of the screen.
How does this show that she
locations of
hit
significance in this
John
case
O'Keefe?
are located in that direction.
The Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Now,
You guys,
as far as the
what a waste
black
of
SUV
time.
that you observe in this video, is that consistent with the
Is it
black
cocktail
SUV
hour
in the
yet?
video from 12:17 a.m.?
Yes.
Is it also consistent with the black SUV that you observed in the library video from 12:15 a.m.?
Yes.
And is it also consistent with the defendant's black SUV?
Yes.
Now, with reference to, are you familiar with Mr. O'Keefe's home having ring cameras affixed to it?
Yes.
And are you familiar with a video from those ring cameras depicting the defendant backing the black SUV out of Mr. O'Keefe's garage at approximately 5:07 a.m.?
Yes.
And from that, as far as distance or time it would take to travel from Mr. O'Keefe's residence to this intersection covered by the Canton Public Library, from 5:07 to 5:11, now depicted on the screen, is that consistent with the time it would take to drive that, particularly given the conditions?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could, please press play. Ms. Gilman, if you could pause that. Now, Ms. Gilman, if you could fast forward to about 15 and 30 seconds. Pause there, please. Now, Lieutenant, between these timeframes of 5:11 a.m. and 5:15 a.m., at any point in time, do you observe the black SUV traveling back in the other direction?
Yes.
And specifically around 5:15 and 51 seconds, what, if anything, did you observe on this video of significance or relevance to this investigation?
A large black SUV will appear on the screen on the right-hand side and travel to the left-hand side, which again would be traveling north on Washington Street.
Now,
Okay.
as far as, again, directionality, north on Washington Street to the left of the screen would be towards the temple, is that correct?
Yes.
And as far as the operation, as far as directionality is concerned, what you observed in this area from 5:15 a.m., is that consistent with what you observed on the Canton Public Library video earlier at 12:15 a.m.?
Yes.
And again, as far as the black SUV that you observe in this, it's consistent with all the other black SUVs you observed in the video and the defendant's video, correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could press play. Pause there. And Lieutenant, if you could, using the laser pointer you have before you, direct the jury's attention to where you observe the black SUV.
Here on Washington Street near the intersection.
Again, using that laser pointer, if you could just indicate to the jury as far as directionality where this vehicle is going to head up.
North would be to the left-hand side of the screen towards Temple Beth Abraham.
If you could press play again. If you could pause there, Ms. Gilman, you can take this one. Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could ask for the Temple Beth Abraham video again. Your Honor, may I have just one moment?
Yes.
You can pause there, Ms. Gilman. And for the record, this is from Temple Beth Abraham video. This is from the period of 5:10 a.m. to 5:20 a.m., which is the second video listed down within those. Now, Trooper, with regard to this video, at some point around 5:18 a.m., what, if anything, did you observe of significance or relevance to this investigation from that period of video?
A large black SUV travel left to right on the screen.
And again, as far as directionality, where would that vehicle be coming from, and where would that vehicle be heading?
The left side of the screen would be in the direction of the Canton Public Library and the Waterfall Bar and Grill. Off to the right, again, would be the intersection with Dedham Street, which one could take to 34th Fairview.
And as far as directionality, with reference to the earlier video from 12:17 a.m. from the Temple Beth Abraham, is directionality consistent in this video with what you observed at 12:17 a.m.?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if you could pray from 518.
So I will be taking a break in about 1 hour. We are getting an update from Johnny Ray in the Gilgo case. And then I will come back to this stream.
And Lieutenant, what, if anything, do you observe in this portion of the video relevant to this investigation?
A large black SUV traveling north on Washington Street.
And again, is that large black SUV that you observed here consistent with the large black SUV you observed in the prior videos and also consistent with the defendant's vehicle?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could please. Excuse me.
How does this prove anything? That's what I want to know.
Thank you, Ms. Gilman. You can take that. Mr. Officer, we can have the lights back on. Now, Your Honor, if I could just have a moment.
Sure.
Now, Lieutenant, through the course of your investigation, are you familiar with what time it was that the defendant, approximately what time it was that the defendant arrived at Ms. McCabe's home?
5:35, approximately.
And Ms. McCabe's home is located on Country Lane, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, from the directionality of that vehicle in the 5:18 a.m. Video, as far as timing is concerned, 5:18 to about 5:35 or so, is that consistent with the time it would take to drive from that area of the Temple Beth Abraham to Ms. McCabe's residence on Country Lane?
No, not if you were to drive directly there.
And so to that point, as far as what about that time doesn't match up? Is it too short, too long, or something else?
It would take you much quicker to get there. It's about 1.5 miles from Temple Beth Abraham to Country Lane. You would continue north on Washington Street and just take a left into the Country Lane neighborhood. So the time to travel, 1.5 miles.
And from sort of the distance between either that Temple video and either 34 Fairview Road or Country Lane, were you able to find, locate, or retrieve any surveillance video in those areas that would capture the vehicle?
No.
Now, as far as you had mentioned earlier in your testimony, when we were talking about the earlier 12:17 a.m. Portion from the Temple Beth Abraham video, the directionality of that black SUV, both in the 12:17 and 5:18, where is Fairview Road in relation to the directionality of the SUV that you observed?
That SUV could take a left onto Dedham Street and then a left onto Cedar Crest to enter down to Fairview Road.
And from your knowledge of the area as far as travel is concerned, would from 5:18 to about 5:35 or so, would that allow for sufficient time to go from where it's viewable on the Temple Beth Abraham video for the vehicle to then travel to 34 Fairview Road and then travel to 12 Country Lane?
Yes.
Now, I believe you had mentioned earlier in your testimony that at some point there were call detail records that were obtained in reference to the defendant's home.
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury, as far as, let me ask you this first, with regard to call detail records and with regard to phones in general, what, if any, specialized training have you received or have you given in reference to those areas of focus?
I've received over 200 hours of training relative to obtaining and using call detail records and cell phone data in furtherance of criminal investigations. Most recently, I've given talks and seminars about the topic, and I've testified in numerous courts around the Commonwealth about the topic.
Now, can you explain to the jury sort of call detail records, what they are and how you would use them as far as utility in generally speaking in reference to investigation?
Call detail records are business records held by cell phone companies, specifically to this matter, that are created in the normal course of business. Typically, you would think about in a billing context. So if you think of your own cell phone bill, it would contain information like the date and time a communication occurred, the other phone number in which you communicated with, the duration of the call, that sort of bits of information. Obviously, as we're doing a criminal investigation, it's helpful to know with whom someone was communicating. Additionally, the cell phone companies memorialize other bits of information specific to what we refer to as CSLI, cell site listing information. They tell us the antennas that were used during the communication, usually just in the form of the first antenna and the last antenna. There are other engineering records that we can obtain that can be helpful when trying to determine where the handset, the cell phone was at any given time.
And the handset that you refer to is essentially the phone itself, right?
Yes.
And with relation to the handset and its connection to antennas or towers, can you speak a little bit about that based on your training and experience with reference to how the handset sort of communicates with an antenna and how it gets to a specific antenna?
Cell phone companies place antennas all around to help facilitate communication. You can think of a cell phone as really a two-way radio. It's sending and receiving radio waves. So in order to facilitate that, cell phone companies place these antennas all around. Traditionally, you can think of them on a tower, but they can also be placed on the side of buildings or disguised as trees or just on top of light poles. So they're all around, but you don't quite know it. As far as how the handset communicates with the antenna, there are different variables that go into that. Now, the cell phone wants to connect to the antenna with the strongest signal. The best predictor of a strong signal is distance. So the further a radio wave travels, the more it's going to degrade and not be as strong. But there are other factors that can degrade or reduce the strength of a radio wave, specifically an obstruction. If you're in a basement of a building or standing behind a large brick wall, the radio waves aren't going to penetrate that as well. But even things like precipitation or foliage on a tree can also hinder it. And you think about rolling hills here in Massachusetts in tall buildings, they can also disrupt radio waves.
As far as that sort of disruption of radio waves, are you familiar with certain areas that get sort of termed as a dead zone?
Yes.
And can you explain what your understanding of that term is as it relates to what you've been talking about as far as the handset communicating with the antenna?
I would define a dead zone as an area where there's not good cell phone coverage. So the antennas are not covering that area for whatever reason, obstruction, the density of the tower. Oftentimes, well, an antenna can only handle so many cell phones at a time. It's an idea that we coin or refer to as load. So there's only a certain number of devices that can handle an antenna. My best analogy of that is Gillette Stadium. I've worked at Gillette Stadium detail many times. We have roll call for Patriots game early in the morning. I take my post. I have strong functionality in my cell phone. As hundreds of thousands of devices are now entering the area around Gillette Stadium, the functionality of my cell phone reduces as more devices are using the antennas in that area.
Now, with respect to the cell phone companies themselves, they create or utilize this data for their own business purposes, correct?
Yes.
And can you just briefly explain a little bit about sort of what the cell phone companies would be using this kind of data for as far as what you're talking about, connections to antennas and towers?
It's a company who wants to make money, so it's going to memorialize things to bill their customers appropriately. They're also required by the FCC to keep for a certain period of time certain records because they are a communications provider. So there are some requirements regulatory that they need to fulfill.
Now, as far as the information that you're able to.
Bang on,
glean
Dandy.
From these call detail records.
Speak
you
up,
spoke a
Lolly.
little bit
Speak
about,
up.
But as far as
Jesus,
what many
man.
limitations are there with reference to the information you're able to glean from the record?
Well, the overarching one is I can only get what I get. So whatever the company sends me, that's what I can use in my determinations. Kind of the next step is when we're talking about antennas, I will never, I'll have difficulty saying exactly where a cell phone was when using an antenna. I can make generalizations that the phone is going to be in the area of the antenna, but I would never, with just that specific information, be able to tell you exactly where it is. I can look at other records, like the engineering records, where, especially now with 4G and 5G technology, the cell phone providers need to know how far away a handset is from the antenna in order to facilitate that communication. And they keep those ranging records for me. So if I can obtain those records, I can then place a much narrower area where a cell phone would have been during a time period.
Now, in reference to this investigation, you the search warrant that Trooper Proctor did with regard to call detail records from Ms. Reed's phone, correct?
Yes.
And were you able to, or did you have occasion to look at those call detail records?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Your Honor, may we approach just sidebar briefly?
Okay.
Sidebar. Yeah, I'm hoping they get into that. Dandy, I got that book from Catherine Ramsland. I haven't started it yet, but I'm looking forward to getting in there and seeing what all is being said with her when it comes to BTK. Because honestly, there's a few of these other cases that book is really, really handy for. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, exactly, Keza, exactly. Okay. So in about another hour, we will have that update from Johnny Ray. And then, like I say, we'll end this stream. We'll watch that, and then I'll come back and finish up with Bev's Shite Show. Yeah, he absolutely had a Fitbit on him. And that's what they were saying, is that it sounds like he was going up and down some stairs at one point. So let's hope that they've got all that data to show to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I say.
A 4-page document, just has to look at the couple of finished. You recognize that document, sir?
Yes.
What do you recognize it to be?
It is the subscriber information for the phone number ending in 9554.
And through the course of your investigation, as far as that phone number ending in 9554, who, if anyone, did you find that number to be associated with?
The defendant, Karen Reed.
Now, with respect to the documents before you, that has some listing of account information, is that correct?
Yes.
And who is listed as the subscriber for that account with phone number ending in 9554?
Karen Reed of 481 Gilbert Street in Mansfield, Massachusetts.
And are you, through the course of your investigation, familiar with that address of 481 Gilbert Street?
Yes.
And is that the residence of the defendant?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Almost.
Yes.
Introduced in the minutes and next exhibit.
No objection.
Okay.
Is it 574?
I'm actually going to see Councilor Sade back in just a minute.
Just gonna ask.
Of course you are, Bev. Of course you are. Sidebar. How many sidebars in less than an hour have we had? Oh my God. Yeah, the break-in streams might do us all good. We get a little frustrated with this case, don't we? It's hard not to get frustrated. I'm looking forward to see what Johnny Ray's going to have to say. There is that. He says he's got evidence. Oh, look at this. A lot of interest about this sidebar. I hope everyone doesn't get so bogged down in wanting to convict her that they're not paying attention to what's coming out. FWB. Bev is very frustrating. I can't disagree with that, Dingo. Nice, Dandy.
Now, Lieutenant Tully,
We marked that, Madam Court Reporter. Thank you. So that's 570. All right, go ahead, Mr. Lally.
thank you, Your Honor. Now, as far as the information that you receive with reference to call detail records, is there a section called the records key?
Yes.
Speak up, Lolly. Come on, dude.
How you use that in order to facilitate a read the record.
Don't you have something to say?
The records key give us the definitions of terms that are used in the record. So the record comes usually in the form of a spreadsheet or PDF. You'll get columns and rows. The columns will be named certain things, and those titles are often specific to the company. So I want to make sure that I'm reading and understanding what the data is.
I believe you alluded to it earlier in testimony, but just for the jury's edification, if you could describe to the jury what your understanding of the term as far as cell site listing information and how that's used in an analysis of call detail.
So CSLI, as it's referred to, has that billing information, time, date, duration, other phone number, and it has the antenna used during the communication. So just as it says, it's a cell site, which is the other term for antenna, as I usually use.
Now, sir, through your training experience, are you familiar with the term in reference to this type of material called ranging data?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean and how it's used in interpretation of call detail records?
So the ranging data goes back to the engineering reports I had mentioned earlier that can provide more information. They can tell me the antennas that were used during communication. It can tell me the range in which the handset was away from the antenna. So now, opposed to just kind of making general determinations where a handset was near an antenna, I now have a range. So I will plot the location of the antenna, measure out that distance, and draw an arc with that radius of the distance on a map. And I can make an assumption that the handset is somewhere on that arc. The ranging data is also helpful because the user does not need to be actively using the phone in order for a record to be created. Right? The billing record is going to be a phone call made or received, text message made or received. A cell phone as it sits today is still communicating with the antenna. You're getting notifications, it's checking email, it's updating, and because it's utilizing the network, your cell phone provider is capturing that data and it's generating a record, even though unbeknownst to the user.
Okay, so to that point, or illustrative of that point, so if I'm standing right here with the cell phone in my pocket, not using it, not turning it on, not activating it in any way, that cell phone is still doing some sort of communication with the closest or some antenna within the vicinity?
Yes.
Now, are you also familiar with a term called UTC, or Universal Time Code?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what that term means and how it relates to these types of records?
So UTC, or now known as Coordinated Universal Time, is the time zone along the prime meridian. So if you think of the globe, you got longitude and time zones. The prime meridian is a spot that runs through Western Europe and Western Africa. That is the line in which all time zones around the world are predicated. And UTC would be a time there, and it's not determined by daylight savings time either. So all those time zones, like I said, around the globe are predicated on that. Because it's one standard time in a globe, a lot of records will come in UTC time, and you have to make the conversion. And they will provide records specific to a cell phone, what time it was locally, but it will tell me what the UTC time was. So for me to figure out what the time was locally during the time of the communication, I got to do the conversion.
And to that point, as far as the conversion is concerned, what type of conversion are we talking about?
Here on the eastern side of the United States, it's -4 hours during the summer and -5 in the winter.
Now, as far as these records are concerned, what, if any, I believe you spoke a little bit as far as the ARC and plotting, but if you could expound upon that as far as explain to the jury what it is exactly you're able to do with the information from the call detail records as far as a visual representation.
You said two things there, so I want to make sure I answer the question right. You mentioned ranging data, but CSLI, so specific to the engineering report in ranging, or CSLI?
Let's first start with CSLI.
So with the CSLI, I will place on a map the location of the antenna. And I mentioned load a little bit, but that load factor determines on how dense the antennas will be from placed by the provider. So if you think of an urban environment, there's more cell phones, there's more devices that need antennas. So the locations of the antennas will be more dense. I've seen them as close as 100 yards away from each other in an urban environment. You come out to the suburbs, there are less devices. The companies are going to put less antennas because they don't want to put them up where they don't need to. They're going to be further away. So in Norfolk County, the antennas are placed anywhere from 1 mile to 4 or 5 miles apart.
And so there would be a difference as far as the amount of antennas, the amount of towers, like say in the town of Canton versus downtown Boston.
Yes.
And again, I think it's pretty clear, but which of those two, as far as downtown Boston and the town of Canton, would have more antennas or more towers for a cell phone to connect to?
Downtown Boston would have more.
And so with relation to the number of antennas or towers that a handset or a cell phone could connect to, what, if any, relation does that have to geographic location, or what you're able to glean in reference to geographic location from the call detail?
So once I place the antenna on a map, I will look at where the other antennas are, and I can make a general determination that the cell phone was closer to that antenna than other antennas. Again, there's the caveat, and I'll say it up front, is that there are other mechanisms that could prevent it from connecting to the closest tower. But generally, it's going to connect to that closest tower. Now, there are redundancies built into the system. If an antenna goes down because of it gets struck by lightning or needs service, there are other antennas nearby that can cover an area.
Now, with respect to the CSLI data, were you able to do that in this case as far as plotting that on a visual representation on a map?
Yes.
Madam Mayor Approach?
Yes.
So showing you, I believe it's a 10-page document, just ask you to review that, look up when you're finished.
He's looking at you, Lally.
And do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
What do you recognize that?
It is a series of maps that I created depicting the records obtained from that number ending in 9554.
And that's plotted onto sort of a Google image or a Google Earth image?
I use Google Earth to create the maps. I then take a screenshot and place it typically in PowerPoint in order to make it look nice.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
You do it or your
Introduce and then
secretary
they
does it?
collectively use the name.
No objection, Your Honor.
575. Thank you.
May I return that to the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Jeez.
So, Lieutenant, directing your attention to the second page there in, and Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish this to the jury.
Okay.
Lieutenant, do you recognize what's depicted now up on the screen?
Yes.
And again, what do you recognize this to be?
It is a map that I created using the information from the call detail records, or CSLI, from that account.
And from what time period of call detail records are we looking at in this particular representation?
From 12:33 a.m. to 12:34 a.m. Again, I had done the conversion for the purposes of making this exhibit. So if one were to look at the call detail records, you may see the UTC time. For the convenience, I've done the conversion for the purposes of the exhibit.
Now, sir, if you could, using the laser pointer, before you direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance you've plotted out, of course, into this visual representation.
So first, we're looking at the area of the town of Canton. I've placed different landmarks, again, to give context to what we're talking about here. You see 34 Fairview Road as a yellow house icon, 1 Meadows Ave, Canton as a darker color, and the Waterfall Bar and Grill as another icon. Now off to the left, just west of Route 95, which you'll see running here, you'll see a red triangle, which I use consistently as the antenna, and a series of letters and numbers next to them. So next to them is the numbering system that Verizon assigns to that antenna. So in this instance, we're looking at ENB, which is the antenna acronym, and specifically 57171.
To be clear, as far as that marking with the red triangle, the ENB ID 57171, that is the antenna that the handset or the defendant's cell phone is connecting to at that point, correct?
Yes, and I always try to be clear that that is the antenna. That's not where I'm saying the handset was.
So the handset is somewhere in that vicinity based on your training experience, is that correct?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if we could have the next slide. And sir, what time period are we looking at in this particular representation?
12:35 to 12:37 a.m.
And again, if you could, using the laser pointer before you, direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance or relevance you depicted in this representation.
So those same icons appear as about the locations relative to this investigation. You'll see another red triangle here close to Route 95, which is NEB ID 57286. And during this time period, the handset associated with this account communicates with that antenna.
And from the locations of significance or relevance as far as ENB ID 57286, which of them is it closest to in this location?
It's just north of 34 Fairview Road.
And now if I could direct your attention to the next, and if I could have the next slide. And Lieutenant, what time frame are we looking at in this this slide?
This comes from one call that occurred at 12:38 a.m.
And as far as, if you could, again, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what, if any, other locations you identified or signified in this representation.
Again, same icons for the south at the bottom. The antenna is located here at the intersection of Route 93 and 138, and it's ENB ID 57021.
of those locations of interest that you signified within this slide, where is ENB ID 57021 in relation to those?
If you think back to the previous slide, so now we've moved a little bit further east. Here's Fairview Road, and here is 1 Meadows Ave.
And if I could direct your attention to the next slide, and if I could have the next slide in this one, please. And Lieutenant, what time frame are we looking at in this one?
12:39 a.m. to 5:08 a.m.
And again, if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what, if any, locations of significance you note in this slide.
So there were a series of calls during this time period. They all used this antenna here, ENB ID 57199, which is south of Meadows Ave.
If I could direct your attention to the next one, please. If I could have that one, please. And Lieutenant Tully, what are we looking at as far as time frame in this particular slide?
There was one entry in the call detail records at 5:16.
And
Oh,
again,
Lordy.
laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to what, if any, locations you denoted within this particular slide.
I'll start with the antenna that was used, which was 57259 here in downtown Canton, just north of the Waterfall Bar and Grill.
If I could direct your attention to the next slide, sir. If I could. Lieutenant, what time frame is depicted in this?
5:19 a.m.
And again, if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where the antenna is that the defendant's phone is connected to at this point, and what, if anything, is closest.
Slightly further south than the previous one, it's 57199, directly south of 1 Meadows Ave.
Alrighty then. If I can find those docs on Stephen Stearns, I will bring them to you.
The next slide is going like that one. And Lieutenant, what time frame are we looking at in this?
5:20 a.m. to 5:37 a.m.
And again, if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to where the antenna is and what, if any, of the locations you observe it, where it is in reference to it.
I previously mentioned this one here at the intersection of Route 93 and 138. It's ID 57021. It's north of those locations I had mentioned earlier, the 34 Fairview and 1 Meadows Ave.
And next slide. What time frame are we looking at in this, sir?
It's one entry at 6 a.m. from the record.
Alrighty
But
then.
again, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to the antenna and where it is in relation to locations of interest in this slide.
It is located just north of the Waterfall Bar and Grill in downtown Canton.
And the next slide, sir. What time frame are we looking at in this slide, sir?
6:03 to 6:57 a.m.
And again, using the laser pointer, if you could direct the jury's attention to which antenna the defendant's cell phone is connected to at this point and where it is in relation to locations of significance or relevance throughout the course of this investigation.
During this time period, the cell phone will bounce back and forth between two antennas. So I did lump them together and place them on one map with this time frame here. So you will see two antennas. One is this one here, just west of Route 95, which is 57171. The other antenna is north of 34 Fairview, which is 7286.
Now, sir, as far as the locations that you observed from looking at the CSLI information from the defendant's phone, any relationship did you note with them in relation to what you had observed on each of the respective videos from the Canton Public Library and the Temple Beth Avery?
It's consistent. As with anything in our investigation, we want to get corroborating information. So the best corroboration about the location of a handset is to obtain video, receipts, anything else with a timestamp and a location that we can corroborate the location of a handset.
And with respect to information that you had received as far as the defendant's whereabouts, what, if any, consistency or corroboration was there between witness accounts of the defendant, including the defendant's own statements, as far as where she was and what you retrieved from the CSLI.
Objection.
Ask it differently, Mr. Mallon.
Throughout the course of the investigation, were you made aware of path of travel attributed to the defendant both between the hours of 12, between the times of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m.?
Yes.
And the information that you obtained from the CSLI records, was that consistent with what you knew as far as the location of the defendant?
Objection.
Ask it differently, Mr. Mallon. The objection is
With respect to what you knew as the path of travel from of the defendant, the information that you obtained from the CSLI, what if any relationship was there between that and the path of travel you knew with the defendant?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
It's consistent.
Now, sir, as far as the ranging data, what, if anything, were you able to do with the ranging data in relation to a visual depiction of that?
Similar to the maps we just saw using Google Earth, I made a visual representation of what the records display, specifically where the antenna is. But I took that additional step to measure the distance out from the antenna that's depicted in the records and draw a semicircle line depicting where that range would lie.
May I approach the witness, sir?
Yes.
Pages. Ask you to look at that and I can push it. Do you recognize those documents, sir?
Yes,
What do you recognize those?
the series of maps I created using the ranging or engineering report.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm also seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
No objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I return them to the witness?
Yes.
And with the court's permission, if I could display them to the jury. It's now been marked as 5 seconds.
Okay.
Now, turning your attention to the second page of what's now been marked as Exhibit 576. Is that what's up on the screen? What you have before you as Exhibit 576, the second page in, is that what's up on the screen, Lieutenant?
Yes,
Now, if you could, again, what time frame are we looking at here?
12:17 a.m.
And again, sir, if you could, using the laser pointer, describe to the jury what's depicted in this particular scene.
So two locations that are, again, as a frame of reference, 34 Fairview Road in Canton and the Waterfall Bar and Grill are depicted with icons. You'll notice a red lollipop would be the best description icon here. And next to it, you see a number and the words either first or last. This one, 3, first or in last. If you were to go back to the record, the ranging report, you would go to line 3, and that's where you would find this record. So it's just an easy way to cross-reference the map with the document. With these ranging reports, it gives me the range that the handset was from the antenna at the beginning of the communication and at the end of the communication. So that's the first range and the last range. That's why we're using those words. You'll notice a line that goes straight out to the semicircles. That line denotes what's called the azimuth. And I've failed to kind of describe what an azimuth is. So as antennas are placed in these locations, they're pointed in a direction. Now, they're not typically a 360-degree antenna. Some are, but mostly they're not. They're pointed in a direction and have a beam width. Rule of thumb, and as you'll see with the records with Verizon, it says typically it's 120-degree beam width because they'll place 3 around a circle and you get 360 degrees. So with this record here, I know what the azimuth is. I then draw a semicircle in each direction. I'll go beyond that 120 degrees just to give deference to maybe it was on the outer edges of that. So I want to give the tie to it was maybe further away. So that's what's depicting on the map.
Now, with reference to this semicircle itself, if I could ask, is the semicircle that is being drawn, what does that exactly denote as to the location of the handset itself?
The report is telling me that the handset is somewhere on that semicircle. So the phone could be anywhere from here on the semicircle all the way around to there on the semicircle.
So again, it's not denoting sort of that the handset of the phone is within the confines of the semicircle, but actually on the line that you've drawn.
Correct.
And if I could ask you to flip to the next slide, and let's go to the next one. Now, with reference to what's up on the screen now, Lieutenant, what time frame are we looking at here?
5:18 a.m.
And, again, if you could, using the laser pointer before you, draw the jury's attention, or direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance you observe in this slide.
So the two icons are, again, appear on the map: Waterfall Bar and Grill, 34 Fairview Road. Here is that red lollipop, which is the antenna that's used during the communication. The azimuth, or the direction in which the antenna is facing, is depicted on there, and two semicircles. The first one and the last one. As a frame of reference, I failed to put the Temple Beth Abraham, which would appear right here.
Now, from this, what's depicted in these last two exhibits, as far as what you're able to plot out from the CSLI and the ranging data, what, if anything, what, if any, significance did that have as far as in reference to the investigation and the handset or the defendant's phone?
It's important to figure out the movements of someone that we're investigating for a crime. So these ranging records really narrow down the scope of they're somewhere around this antenna to it's possible they were somewhere on this line. Again, these records are just depicting where the handset was, but as we all know, we all travel with our cell phone within arm reach.
And again, it's in reference to this ranging data in the last two slides here. What, if any, relationship did you find that to have with other information, being videos and witness statements that you obtained during the course of the investigation?
So as we previously showed, Temple Beth Abraham, which would be located here, just south of this intersection here, depicts a large black SUV traveling north on Washington Street. That SUV is similar to the defendant's. And with this record here, a phone associated with the defendant was somewhere on this arc at that exact same time.
So may I have a moment, Chairman?
Yes.
May I approach just to retrieve, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
What? What?
Good morning, Lieutenant Tully.
Good morning.
I'm not going to go in any particular order, so forgive me if I bounce around just a little bit. You indicated that on direct examination this morning that you didn't seek a search warrant for 34 Fairview, the interior 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
To your knowledge, nobody under your supervision sought such a search warrant either, correct?
Correct.
You explained that in your mind, there was no probable cause to seek a search warrant for the interior of the home. Is that right?
Yes,
But you also admitted that you didn't seek consent, for which you don't have to have probable cause if you get consent, correct?
correct.
You could ask me right now, hey, Alan, can I look at your cell phone? I say, sure, you do your thing, right?
I could.
But for a court to order that I hand over my cell phone, you got to get a search warrant, sign an affidavit, and get a court to agree with it, correct?
Yes,
You've applied for myriad search warrants in your career, I'm guessing.
yes,
Very experienced, correct?
supposedly.
And I expect that there have been circumstances, Lieutenant Tully, in which you sought a search warrant and the judge says, no, I don't think there's enough here, correct?
Yes.
You don't get in trouble for that, correct?
With whom? No,
With the court.
no,
Law, it's not illegal.
it's not illegal.
You don't get sanctioned for it. You don't get your pay docked because you don't get a search warrant based on an affidavit, correct?
Correct.
So there's no real sanction in seeking it if you in good faith believe that there's a reason to seek it, correct?
Outside of the time that it takes to author it and put it
course.
together and go to the court, yes, there's no sanction.
Of course, but in a homicide investigation, you're not going to fail to do certain investigative tasks because it takes time. You're going to do what is necessary for the investigation, correct? Yes. Of course. You indicated that you did not believe that there was information sufficient that y'all had at the very initial stages of the investigation to seek a search warrant or to ask for consent, correct?
Yes,
But you did know the following. In the initial moments of the beginning of the investigation, you were aware that John O'Keefe had been invited to a party inside a home, correct?
yes,
You knew that that home was located at 34 Fairview.
yes.
You also knew that John O'Keefe arrived at 34 Fairview, correct?
We believe so, yes.
You also knew at the time that he had been, for want of a better phrase, partying with the individuals who were inside the home, correct? Expected to meet at the house.
They were at a bar previous to that, yes.
You're aware that a drinking glass was found in the yard attendant to or close to, adjacent to where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found.
Yes,
That drinking glass had been broken, correct?
yes,
You're aware that drinking glasses are commonly found inside homes, right?
as well as bars.
As well as bars, right? But at that point, you didn't know. It's just a broken glass, correct?
It's a broken glass, correct?
You also know that he was found without a coat on.
Yes,
Are coats normally worn outside or inside?
it's user's choice.
Fair enough. 18 degrees, you would expect that if someone was outside, they'd have a coat on, correct?
I'm the kind of person that wears shorts throughout the year. I'll often go without a jacket.
All right, a true Bostonian.
Yes, sir.
He didn't have any coat, gloves, scarf, nothing like that.
Correct,
He had no winter gear on whatsoever, correct?
correct.
Under ordinary circumstances, and you may be the exception, but under ordinary circumstances, if someone was out in 18-degree weather, you might expect that they would have some winter garb on, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
You certainly would expect that if someone took their coat, their glove, their hat, their winter gear off, you might leave it inside the house, right? Rather than outside the house.
Objection.
I'll let you answer that, Detective Lieutenant.
It's probably predicated on where you take it off
Right,
and your relationship to the location.
right. Reasonable assumption might be the winter gear might be inside the house.
Objection.
Is that a reasonable assumption, Detective Lieutenant?
No, Your Honor.
It's not reasonable that he would have his jacket inside the house? You wouldn't just assume that?
Using the term "the house," you talking about any house? 34 Fairview?
Correct.
No, it's not reasonable.
All right. You didn't think it was reasonable at the time
Still don't.
to even ask, would he have had a jacket off inside the house? And I'm talking about at the time, the initial stages of the investigation.
Who am I asking this question to?
So I'm asking if you believe it is reasonable, if a man is found 30 feet outside the front door of a home and he's got no winter gear on whatsoever, that perhaps he came from inside the home, not having donned his winter gear.
Objection.
Can you answer that, Detective Lieutenant?
It's not reasonable, given other information I had.
You also know that he didn't have a shoe on, correct?
Yes.
Where might you look for the shoe if you didn't find it out by his body initially?
Well, the question's not accurate to the facts we had at the time.
Well, the facts you had at the initial stages, I'm talking about just after 6:37, 7:30 in the morning, when the investigation was beginning. During those times, you didn't have any information about where the other shoe was, except he just didn't have a shoe on at the hospital, correct?
We didn't know there was a shoe not accounted for until after noontime.
So when you did find out that there was a shoe unaccounted for, one place to look might be outside, correct?
Yes,
And another place to look might be inside the home, correct?
we looked at the former and we located it there.
You also are aware that a body is being dragged by the shoulders could easily lose a shoe.
Objection.
Have you ever experienced a homicide in which a body is dragged and you're aware of a shoe being pulled off while the body's being dragged?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
I don't have experience with that.
Certainly not outside the realm of possibility as a professional investigator.
It's possible.
You're also aware that, at least initially, it appeared from accounts that John O'Keefe may have been involved in a physical altercation, correct?
Possible.
As a matter of fact, that was reported by one of your subordinates, Yuri Buchanan, to the medical examiner's office, right?
As a possibility, yes.
As a possibility. And you're aware that your other subordinate, Trooper Proctor, according to certain information he had gotten from first responders, also believed that a physical altercation was possible, right? As well.
It was possible, yes.
Okay. And you also knew that the house would be a normal location to have other individuals who might have been involved in that physical altercation.
Objection.
Can you answer that, Detective Lieutenant?
An altercation could take place anywhere.
Exactly.
And people can often travel from the location of the altercation miles away to another location.
Or they could travel 30 feet outside as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In the early morning hours of, well, let's say the hours following your Massachusetts State Police initiation or engagement in this investigation, you became aware of Brian Higgins, correct?
Yes.
That name was bantied about as a potential witness in the investigation, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware that Brian Higgins indicated that he saw a tall, dark-haired man enter the home after he arrived, correct?
I'm not aware of that.
And the reason you're not aware of it, Lieutenant Tully, is because nobody bothered to interview Brian Higgins until February 10th, right?
Objection.
So in that form, then it's sustained. Ask it differently, Mr.
When was
Jackson.
Brian Higgins first interviewed?
February 7th?
7th, 10th?
To-
Yeah, in February, not January 29th, certainly.
Correct.
Although he was known to be inside the house, correct?
Yes.
So had you known that, had you had the information, for instance, that Brian Higgins admitted to having seen a tall, dark-haired man walk in the house, that might have changed the complexion of your investigation at that time.
Objection.
Can you answer that, Detective Lieutenant?
In the off chance that Mr. Higgins presumably had said something like that, I would certainly need more information describing this person. I would ask a series of questions to narrow it down to make sure that this person was John O'Keefe.
Right, exactly. That would just be a normal part of the investigation. You just take evidence A and link it to evidence B to evidence C. That would be the normal way to do an investigation.
We would normally follow the evidence. Correct.
But in point of fact, nobody did seek a warrant to go inside the house, correct?
Correct.
Nobody did seek to have a forensic team go inside the house and look,
Correct.
and nobody asked for consent.
Correct.
I want to ask you about the Sallyport video, if I could. Did you obtain a copy of any video surveillance footage from Canton Police Department?
Yes.
Okay. If you can, tell me which footage you obtained and where. And there's several videos, Lieutenant, and it can be confusing. So if you could be as detailed as possible, explain what footage you gathered and when you gathered.
Most recently, and the date escapes me, but it's within the last couple of months, I had contacted Chief Helena Rafferty of the Canton Police Department and asked her to burn another copy or create another copy of the Sallyport video during a certain time period on January 29th to ensure that the video that we had received previously was all of the records responsive to that request.
And you found out that the video that you received earlier was not, in fact, completely responsive because there was a video left out, right?
I didn't do a one-to-one comparison. I just had made the request.
Ultimately, you did receive a video of the interior of the Sallyport, correct?
Yes.
And can you tell me, did you look at that? Did you review that video?
Quickly, not the whole thing.
Okay. Was there anything of note about that interior video? By the way, let me ask you another question, Lieutenant Tully, just to clarify. There's a very grainy, dark, almost black of the interior, correct? You've seen that one?
Yes.
Or excerpts of it?
Yes.
And that video is missing some pretty significant time frames throughout the video?
I didn't review the whole thing, but I'm aware of that video existing.
Fair enough. Then there's another video that's pretty clear, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm asking you about the clear video. Did you make any note about anything unusual about that video?
No. But again, I didn't really review it.
You didn't review it with any detail?
Correct.
Did you make a note that that video was inverted?
I did not.
Did you make a note about the timestamp on the video either being correct and properly positioned or inverted?
No.
Did you give that video to Trooper Proctor?
I believe I gave it to Sergeant Buchanan.
Sergeant Buchanan, and then what did Sergeant Buchanan do with it?
Reviewed it.
Okay. Is that somehow uploaded onto the Massachusetts State Police computer system somehow for safekeeping?
No, we'll hold it within the DA's office on that server. You know, it's not touching the MSP.
Okay, so it is uploaded on some sort of server.
We will memorialize it somewhere, yes.
Did Chief Rafferty give it to you on a thumb drive or a disk, or how was it physically provided?
I don't know. I didn't receive it. She dropped it off at the office. I remember a thumb drive.
You remember a thumb drive. All right. And then it's uploaded onto the system, and the case officer would have access to that system.
Yes.
Okay. And in this case, that would be Trooper Proctor.
Yes.
Did you notify Trooper Proctor, when I say immediately, reasonably quickly, after you received or after you got notice that the video had been dropped off by Chief Rafferty?
I informed Sergeant Buchanan.
Okay. And do you know, as you sit here, you may not, as you sit here, do you know if Sergeant Buchanan reasonably quickly informed Trooper Proctor that that video existed?
I don't know when or where that notification was made.
As you sit here now, you are aware that Trooper Proctor is aware of that video and had access to it?
Yes.
Okay. Yesterday, there were some testimony about taillight pieces that were found at the location, correct?
Yes.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I pose the court magistrate for a question?
So I think this is a good place to stop. We are going to bounce over to the other stream and wait for an evidence update, I suppose, from Johnny Ray. So this is on the Lisk, Gilgo 4, Rex Yerman case. So keep your eyes peeled. It'll be out in just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to bounce right back to this. So guys, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys really soon in the next one. Bye.